Hey guys, so in this part of the course, we're going to talk about metrics and analytics. And this is really important for any product manager. It is part of one of those core key skills that you need to have as a product manager. And it is one of the most important aspects of product management. And the reason being that as a product manager, one of your most important roles and responsibilities is achieving success. Now, what does success look like? It actually varies from company to company, and what helps you define that as a product manager and as a part of a product team are metrics. So you basically want to hit specific targets on metrics that you and your team have defined that are that which you are ultimately going to be responsible for. And obviously, when you're defining metrics for your product, you're not working on your own, but you actually have a strong connection with management strategic goals and objectives and the goals and objectives that the company has also set for itself. So by now you're probably wondering, what is a metric? A metric is basically a number that tells you something about the performance of a product. It generally is expressed in the form of a ratio or a percentage. And like I said, it helps you describe how well you're doing in order to achieve your product goals and the goals of you and your product team. That's basically what a metric is. And I'll give you examples of metrics in a little bit, but I also wanted to talk about analytics because you'll often hear the terms used interchangeably, metrics and analytics, as if they were exactly the same thing, but they're actually not the same thing. So the word analytics comes from the word analysis. And obviously that means the analysis that comes from that number, the metric, and what you do with it. Okay, so the metric is kind of like the what, and the analytics is kind of like the what for, what you're going to be using those metrics for. So combined, they are both really important aspects of product management: metrics and analytics. Both are things you will use to ensure you can achieve product success and the goals and objectives that you and your product team have set for your particular product. So when you're thinking about metrics, or key performance indicators as they're also called, there are generally 5 big categories: growth, engagement, retention, happiness, and revenue, right? These are the 5 top categories in metrics in the world of product management. And when you're thinking about growth, as its name implies, you're basically thinking how much your product is growing over time. So think about metrics such as number of new users, number of active users, percentage of active users per month, and so forth. Another example of growth metrics would be in a mobile application, the number of downloads that application has in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Both of those numbers would allow you to identify how much your product is growing. And obviously, the bigger, the better. So you want to have as much growth as possible. And one of your roles as a product manager will be to help drive that growth of that product and make sure that more people are using it, more people are buying it, and so forth. The second category, which we talked about, was engagement. And this has to do with the level of interaction and the amount of interaction that an end user has with your product. So let's go to Udemy, for example, right? And let's use this as a real world example. So one of the things that, and one of the metrics that Udemy would be interested in is the amount of minutes watched per student, the average amount of minutes watched per month per student. That would be a good example of an engagement metric, because that means that the higher the number of minutes watched on Udemy, it means the students are actually spending more time on the product or on the application. And obviously that's something that you want as a product manager. One of your objectives when you have developed a product is to make sure that you can create as much engagement as possible. So similar to the growth metrics like we talked before, in the example of Udemy as a product, they are actually interested in having more new students every month. And that's why they're going to have a bunch of metrics around that. For example, number of new students per country, per region, right? So they might have specific targets that they're going to be hitting for each of those different markets. And they might also be looking at, for example, the percentage of growth per month. So for instance, they might have a metric target of we're going to have at least a double-digit growth per month on the different markets across the world. So that would be a growth metric. But like I said before, when we're talking about engagement, it has to do with the interaction and the amount of interaction that the end user has with the product, right? So those are two of the categories. Now, when we go to the third category, which is retention, like its name implies, it relates to you having the users stay with the product. So come back to the product. You keep them, they continue to use the product. That is what we refer in the world of product management as retention. So ideally, of course, you don't want in the example of Udemy, your students going to Skillshare or Coursera or Udacity or one of those other online learning applications. You actually want them to stay on Udemy and continue to study there as you are trying to retain them. You are trying to keep them continue to use that product. So that is an example of retention, right? And when we're talking about retention, there's a bunch of different metrics that you could come up with around that. Like for instance, how many of your or what percentage of your total users are actually logging in again every month, right? So, and you might have metrics around that, and you might be looking at that every 6 months and and every 12 months, etc. You want to be actually assessing how many of those users continue to come back to your product over time. And for instance, another example could be you might take your total users, and also you might take, you might analyze and reassess after a period of time how many of them are, let's say, enrolling in a new course, in the example again of Udemy as a product, right? How many of them are actually enrolling in a new course? And if they're not enrolling in a new course, then you might have actually lost them. Like if, for instance, if you actually check, let's say, number of logins or percentage of logins over time, and you see that as a 0 or it's a very low number, then you might think, or more like a 0, you might think that you actually lost them. They're actually not interacting. So you might check, have they enrolled in a course? Have they bought a new course? Have they created a course? And if none of those metrics are ticking the box, then obviously you're not retaining your students in the application, right? The end users, your ultimate goal with this particular category of metrics is that you want to keep them engaged and you want to keep them coming back to the product. So you want to retain them. If you lose them, that's obviously not a good thing, right? Because then they're actually spending their time, or they're consuming other products, which means they're actually producing more money for those other companies, right? And then let's talk about the fourth category in the world of product management and metrics, which is happiness. So happiness, like its name implies, has to do with the level of satisfaction that the end users have with your product. And you might have seen this in examples of when you get emails from companies that say, how likely are you to recommend this to another company or to another person? How likely are you to recommend this product to another person? And you get those smiley faces and 1 to 10 and stuff like that, and you just rate them, right? That is an example of happiness. Or you might just get, a thumbs up, a thumbs down, and then the company might do a percentage to create a metric, right? Because like we talked before, a metric is basically just a number that tells us something about a product. So they might actually turn that into a number of, a percentage or a ratio that tells us of the total users that enrolled in a course this month, 50% of them rated it as 5 stars, 40% of them rated it as 4 stars, and and so forth. So that is telling us a level, the level of satisfaction with the product. Another example would be a mobile application. So if you're looking at a mobile application and you're looking at the ratings on the App Store, then that is also a good example of happiness, because you'll see generally that when people are downloading an app, if they like it, they'll leave a higher obviously number of stars, and they'll say, I love it, it's a great product, and so forth. If they don't like it, They might give it a 1 star, a 2 star, and say, I hate this product, it's not good for you, it didn't help me achieve what I was trying to achieve, and so forth. So happiness metrics are really also important for us as product managers, particularly when we are actually launching new features, because we want to check and assess whether the end users are happy with the new things that we've launched, whether it's helping them or whether it's actually not meeting their objectives or not helping them like we expected. Another way in which you can assess happiness metrics would be by looking at results from support. So you might actually contact your help desk or your customer service team and capture the number of phone calls and the total complaints over the total number of phone calls, and that'll give you an indicator, a percentage, to tell you how satisfied or dissatisfied users are with your product. So this also, again, is another very important category. And then last but not least, the final category is revenue, right? So obviously everything that we are trying to do in our role of product management leads to this final category of metrics, right? And these might be things such as average number of revenue per end user or per customer, or in the case of the Udemy example, average revenue per student. So how much money is each student that is enrolled in Udemy, in a course in Udemy, bringing the company? So that's an indicator that we want to increase over time, right? So obviously we want to have a higher spend per end user in our products. So we are constantly working on driving that higher. So when we're talking about the happiness metrics, in the case of dissatisfaction or people not being happy, we want to drive that metric down, right? Downwards. But in the case of revenue, we want to drive that upwards. So higher is better, right? So depending on the nature of the metric and what you are trying to accomplish, it will be better that it's higher or going up, or it will be better that it's actually lower or going down, right? So for instance, when we talked about the engagement before, the category of engagement, let's talk about minutes watched, which also applies to something like, let's say, YouTube. You obviously, as a product manager working at YouTube, you want to increase the number of views, the number of people watching a particular video, or the total videos that you have in the platform, because that helps drive growth for the product. And you also want to, for instance, in the case of Instagram, when you're talking about, let's say, metrics around engagement, you want to see people posting, because posting more often means that they're actually spending more time on your product. See? So all of these different categories and metrics within each of those categories are actually intertwined, and you are basically trying to accomplish similar things with them. Ultimately, you're trying to increase the overall engagement with the product. You want to have more people using the product. You want to have their satisfaction higher. You want to have them coming back to use your product, and you want to help them drive revenue for the business and for the product itself, right? So that's why we create metrics around each of these categories to help us achieve those goals. Now, there might be some metrics that are fairly common across different types of products and industries, such as, for example, number of new users or new customers and stuff like that. But of course, there are also metrics that are going to vary depending on the category or the industry or the type of product that you've created. But most importantly, depending on the goals that you and your team have set for your product in alignment and in agreement with management, right? So this is why I think it's important to understand that even though there are some commonalities, it doesn't mean that you're going to be seeing the same metrics across any type of products, but there are some that tend to be fairly consistent regardless of the industry or of the type of product. Now, I also wanted to mention that depending whether you have joined a big company or a small company, you might actually be arriving to a place that already has metrics, and they might just give you the responsibility, okay, so you're in charge of this particular set of metrics, and your responsibility is to improve this one, increase this one, etc., right? So that it's probably very common where you're going to companies that have a mature product in the market, or companies that are quite established and have been around for a while, which is probably the vast majority of companies that you are going to end up as a product manager. But if you start your own product or your own company, or you're working for a very small startup, they might not have those metrics defined and might look at you as a product manager to come up with recommendations on which metrics you're going to be, monitoring and controlling and analyzing. And then we go back to the analytics side of things. So in the world of analytics, which, like I said before, is more like the what for, so the analysis of those metrics, there are some things that you can do manually, by observation or from you deriving your own conclusions. But there are also some things that can be done automatically through different systems or different applications that provide analytics for you. I'll give you an example right now. Let's talk about Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is this little bit of code that you insert on, for instance, your website, and it'll tell you the number of new visitors that you're getting, the age range, where they're coming from. So all of this information will be compiled for you automatically by Google, and they're going to provide to you, graphs and pie charts and stuff like that, which are basically analytics, so are basically insights coming from those metrics like we talked before. So there are a bunch of tools out there for metrics and for analytics. And when I'm talking about metrics, generally I'm talking about dashboards. So when we talk about the word dashboard, if you're not familiar with it, it is basically, a set of metrics that are consolidated into a one-pager or a centralized view that allow you to, at a glance, understand how well your business or your product is performing. So that's all what a dashboard is. That's basically what you do with a dashboard. And again, there's a ton of different tools out there which you can use, and I'm going to provide examples of that in the tools section of the course so that you can go and review that on your own. All right, guys, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of this from this part of the course, and now you have a really good understanding of metrics. Like we talked about before, there are a couple of key categories, but it doesn't mean that you can't come up with metrics outside of those, but those are the most common and widely used across all industries. And like I mentioned, depending on the type of company that you're joining as a product manager, they're going to have those metrics already established for you, and you're going to be responsible for some of them in your role as product manager to ensure that whatever it is that you've defined as success for your product, what that looks like, it's going to be tied to those metrics. And that's why it is such a big part of you being a product manager, because reaching those goals and objectives is one of those key aspects of your role. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye. Hey, guys. So one of the most exciting things that you're going to be doing as a product manager is creating product roadmaps. So what are product roadmaps? Basically, product roadmaps are a visual representation of the future releases that you're going to be doing for a particular product. So whenever you're planning to make an important deliverable, an important new feature going into the market for your product, that is something that you're going to incorporate into your product roadmap, such as the one that you're seeing there on the right hand side of the screen. Now, I want you to know that there isn't a single product roadmap template or tool that you should use. There are plenty of product road mapping tools out there. There are some free ones, some that you have to pay for, and there are also a ton of different templates that you could use. And I'm actually going to share in a moment a couple of examples, and I'm also going to provide those templates to you for free as part of the course, which you can use in your role as a product manager when you're creating product roadmaps. So like I said, the product roadmap is a visual representation of what you're going to be releasing, new things that are coming out for the product that allow you to also have a single point of conversation with your stakeholders. And it also allows you to work together with your team on priorities and remain focused on those key deliverables that you want to take to market. Now, a product roadmap is not a static document. I also want you to learn that a product roadmap is a living, breathing document that you're constantly going to be iterating, improving, and enhancing over time as you're working in your product development. So, for instance, you might have something that you have planned for release in Q3, and then a new part, another part of the business asks you to release something new that wasn't originally part of your plan. So you might look at what you were planning to deliver in Q3, and you might shift some of those things to Q4 or to the next year, and then add that particularly new priority for the business in Q3. So that's something that our product manager does on a regular basis. We're generally looking at our product roadmap, which allows us to plan ahead and also allows us to remain focused on priorities. Product roadmaps are generally done with at least a year in advance, a view of at least a year in advance. So you're generally looking at least a year of development of your product. But some product teams do product roadmaps for 2, 3, and even up to 5 years ahead of them working on things. Now, obviously, as you deviate more into the future, those things can potentially will have a higher risk or a higher probability of changing, but it still serves as a as a document or as a reference for the product team and for the business of what you have in the plan, in the pipeline of things that you're going to be releasing. But like I said before, most product teams work with a year, a view of a year in advance, or 1 or 2 years in advance of the work that they're doing. Now, what you put into the product roadmap incorporates those things that you have been working with your designers, your developers, and the rest of your team to deliver. And it could be something new. It could be a new feature, a new functionality. It could be a completely different version of something. For instance, in your product roadmap, let's say you currently have a mobile application in iOS and you currently don't have a mobile application for Android. So part of your roadmap might incorporate, like, let's say in March, we're actually going to release the Android version of the same product. Or for instance, you might have a desktop version of that product, but you don't have a cloud version. And a future release might involve actually you creating a cloud version and putting it out there for the market. So that is something that would also go into your product roadmap. Product roadmaps are one of those really fascinating things in the world of product management, and I use them all the time. They're super relevant for conversations with your stakeholders, and they're also very important for conversations internally within your product team. All right, now I'm going to show you here a couple of other examples of product roadmaps, such as this one, which is like I said before, it's just a visual representation of things that you're going to be delivering over time in a particular point in time. And this is just another template. This is a PowerPoint template that I'm going to be sharing with you in the resources section of the course, where you can download all the different things that I'm going to be providing to you, such as templates, etc. And this is one of them that I'm going to be sharing with you, and I'm sure you're going to find it helpful. Here is another one. All right, so you can see here Q1, Q2, Q3, the year, the milestone that is being delivered. It says there milestone. You don't have necessarily to use milestone. It can be actually something that is going live, a particular product feature or functionality, or an entirely new version of that product, like we talked before, such as a different version of a mobile application, cloud version, desktop version, or whatever it is. Now, later in the course, I'm going to be providing not just templates, but actual real world examples of product roadmaps that you can actually go and see on your own, so that you can see what product managers do when they create these things. And like I said, to me, they are simply fascinating because it's just such an important part of the role of any product manager, because it allows you to have that vision of where you're going to. It's kind of like that map that maps out what you're going to be delivering over time, and allows you to have a vision of that product, what it's actually going to be what it's actually going to look like in a year's time into the future. So I find that super exciting. And here's another example again of the product roadmap. And you're going to be hearing later as well, when we talk about your end users, how you feed their input or feedback into the product roadmap as well. Now, that's also something that is super important for any product manager. Obviously, you're not going to be building product roadmaps just sitting on a desk on your own. You actually have to incorporate into the product roadmap the feedback and the valuable information that you're getting from the business, from your different stakeholders, from the customers, the end users, and also from your own internal and external research about things that you can do to improve the product or to make that experience of the users that are interacting with your product even better. Okay, so like I said before, there isn't a single, way of creating a product roadmap. Some people do them in Excel, some people do them in PowerPoint, some people do them in applications such as Trello or Roadmap, and there's a ton of different ways of creating a roadmap, which I also find is something that you're gonna come across often as a product manager, and that is there isn't a single way of doing things. There's generally multiple different ways or multiple different templates or multiple different tools that you could use to create or generate exactly the same thing. Which one you use is actually entirely up to you as a product manager, and obviously the ones that you use or the ones that you prefer might be ones that have a better impact on your business stakeholders, on that you feel you have a more captive audience where you're presenting them, or also that your team and yourself prefer, just because it's easier for you guys to work together using a particular tool, application, or template. Now, I also want to share that it's not rare to see, for instance, product managers using, they might have something in the cloud. Let's say they might be using an application, but then when they're going into a meeting with investors or with the business, they might actually take that information and place it into a more visual way, such as one of the slides that we just saw a moment ago. So those are examples of product roadmaps and templates that you can use, which are very visual, very appealing for meetings, like I said, with investors or particular business stakeholders that might not want to go into a tool like Jira or Trello or something like that to see your product roadmap, and would actually prefer just something more, corporate or business, such as a PowerPoint presentation. So like I said, on occasion, you might be taking information from these different sources and putting it in different, representing that same information using different tools or templates. But generally speaking, you will have one single source of truth for your product roadmap. And if your business and stakeholders and team are comfortable using that single source of truth, well, then why would you transfer the information, from one template or one source to another? That would just create more work for you, right? So I don't mean to convey that that's something that you would do generally. Normally, you just have that single source of truth, and people are just happy looking at that single source of truth. But on occasion, you might actually have to tailor that information to different types of audiences that you're going to be interacting with as a product manager. And that's where you might actually be using different templates or tools to present the same information. All right, guys, in the next part of the course, I'm going to show you some real world examples so you can embed in these concepts that we just covered in this lecture and this part of the course around product road mapping. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye. Hey guys, so in this part of the course, I want to show you a really interesting case, and that's a product called Singha, right? And Singha here, as you can see, is basically a neobank. So it's an Australian neobank that is designed so that people can use everything digitally and not have to go to a physical place to manage their money and their banking, etc. Right? So it's one of those new players, and it's a financial technology application that allows people to open a bank account, transfer money, make payments, etc., directly from their mobile phone or from their computer. Now, I wanted to show you this real life example just to show you also a product roadmap in Trello. Trello is a free tool which you can use from Atlassian as well, so from the same company that makes Jira, which also, by the way, has a free version, but also a paid version like Trello. But the one that they're using here, I just wanted to show you this product roadmap because it's very interesting. It's a real world, real life example, which you can see yourselves by just going to this link and then clicking here on products roadmap, okay? But before we go there, I just wanted to really quickly show you the Singha page here. Win-win, so build your own bank, etc. They've been in the news all over. Really interesting case. And I wanted to show you this case because this is not an IT case, but actually from the banking industry. It's an example, a real world example of how you can apply product road mapping to a product in the banking industry. So this is not IT, this is not a technology product, but actually from the financial industry, a bank, a neobank, a product from the financial industry. And that's why I wanted to show you this example. So you can see here a product roadmap. And I really love how this company is, they're very agile. They're applying agile principles in everything that they do. And they're constantly releasing and launching new products and new services. So I'm going to go here to products and then you just click on roadmap. And okay, it's showing here a little bit of the Sinha roadmap. Check out the Sinha roadmap. And you can see here the example of the roadmap in Trello. And it just says here, we share our product roadmap. So just click here. And then it'll take you here to Trello, to the product roadmap. Here you go. So about this board, so it gives you a little bit of an example. I'm just going to close this. And you can see here about this roadmap, so a bit of an explanation for you to read. I'm not going to read that for you now. You can read it yourself. But you can see here what they've delivered October to December, and then January to March 2020, April to June, July to September, right? So they have here, this is basically Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and beyond. All right, so you can see here new functionality in 2021, right? So like I said, you're seeing here, you can sign up for free, but this is a really cool thing about Trello and product road mapping, and it can be very visual and very simple. In one of the examples before, we saw something a little bit more, I guess, complex in the build and in the development, which was that Jira Roadmap. Not that I thought it was super complex, but it was, I guess, it had a little bit of a different structure to it, a little bit more robust is the way I would describe it. When I compare Trello and Jira, they're really good products. They're from the same company, but Trello is a little bit more minimalistic and Jira is a little bit more robust, more powerful. Okay, but you can see here they also have the same concept. They have different colors for streams of work that relate to the same thing. So for example, this one is related probably to background delivered. This one here says delivered. Okay, what does it say? Background delivered. What does it say? Confirmed. Okay, so they're using targeted, so they're using different colors to, illustrate different concepts or streams in their work. And then they have here the different deliverables, which would be pretty much for us the different epics of what we're trying to achieve, right? Security upgrades. So if I click on this one, okay, it'll tell you a little bit more information if they've written more information. Referral rewards. You can see here they move the card, etc. It's been labeled called confirmed. 166 votes, so 166 people voted for this to get this done. So like I said, this is another beautiful way in which you can do your product roadmaps by using Trello. And like I said before, it illustrates the same thing that we talked about before in the course, which our product roadmap just basically gives you a visual representation of what's going to be achieved in the foreseeable future of the development of a product. All right. And here you can see that they've done it by developing columns for each quarter, so Q1, Q2, but they haven't called it Q1, they just call it Jan to March, April to June, etc. And they put below all the different cards here in Trello to represent the different deliverables or epics, as we would call them in Jira, as we would call them in Agile. And then here they've also added, I guess, a few icons just to make it a little bit more visual for people. And they've allowed you to vote here as well. So they've added this voting functionality here. And this is a public roadmap, which means anyone can see it. But I think this is really cool because, as you can see, this really, company, this is a real world company that I'm showing you, is actually using Trello to build a roadmap. And they explain here how they use it and what's the purpose of it, etc. You can read more about that as well here in the About. If you click here, read this first, it's going to describe a little bit more about the roadmap. Here's an attachment as well, which you can read. So I thought that this is a really cool example of a non-IT product that is using Trello to develop their product roadmap. And I'll put a link so you can see this yourself and go through it in more detail. But as you can see, it's very simple, nothing fancy, nothing super sophisticated. It's just showing you visually what you're going to be delivering over time in a years of work and beyond. So they put here 2021, so beyond 2020. So this is also something that I think is really helpful when you're working on a product that is not discarding any new ideas or any new things that come up. If something new comes up and you know you're not going to deliver in the short term or in the short to medium term, then you want to capture that in your future product roadmap, right? Like here, shared accounts. So they're not doing shared accounts now for this bank, but they will do them and they're planning to do them in 2021. So this helps you also to manage expectations with stakeholders, because sometimes you're going to get stakeholders asking you for things, or customers or end users, and you just got to capture all of that great feedback and valuable feedback. And so you don't lose it, you can put it either in the parking lot or in a future state of the of the product. So like in this scenario that we're seeing, we're putting in the product roadmap for 2021. Now, we haven't gotten to the stage here in this example that we're seeing where they've actually broken 2021 into the different quarters and what they're going to do first, etc. Although they do have it, of course, organized here in the list. Probably the top ones are the higher priority ones in this product roadmap. But next year, what you would see some other product managers do is they've actually taken the 2021 and spread it in different quarters like they did for 2020. And in this scenario, they haven't gotten to that stage yet. And this team in particular, the Sinha team, has decided to focus initially on the year at hand, getting all of this done. And then afterwards, probably towards the end of 2020, they'll spend some time breaking this down further into different quarters and to different months of the year to plan out their product roadmap for 2021. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this example of how this neobank is using agile principles and the product roadmap concept to develop and build the bank as a whole, their products and the services of this new neobank here in Australia. So I think this is one of those really good examples because it's a real world example of a bank using agile and product management to develop the future of the bank, the products and the services that they offer. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye. Hey guys, so in this part of the course, I want to show you a real world example of a product roadmap in Jira. And as you can see here, we have the whole year from January till December, and we've divided that in the product roadmap by quarters, which is typically something you would do when you're developing a product roadmap. So you have here Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. That stands for quarter 1 of the year, quarter 2 of the year, quarter 3 of the year, and quarter 4. So the whole year divided in groups of 3 months, right? So the first group is January till March, second April till June, third July till September, and the fourth quarter October till December, right? So vertically, you have here the quarters of the year, right? And horizontally, you have different groupings or categories, which in this case are basically streams of work, right? So this is something we've created specifically for this, right? Obviously, the groupings and the categories could vary depending on the type of product that you're developing, right? But you can see here we have archiving, audit requirements, data governance, discovery portal publishing, and essential maintenance. So in this particular case, those are the streams of work for this product that we're building. And that's why we've called them with those names, and that's why we've grouped the different work that we're doing in those different big streams of work. Now, because we're working through this using Agile in our development process, you can see here that we have the different sprints, sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, etc., up until sprint 15, which is our current sprint. Now, this road mapping functionality in Jira allows you to add this label here so you can see from which date till which date is the sprint, right? And what you're seeing here as well below are the different epics that are part of this product, of what we are building, right? And you can't fully read the name of all of this because it sometimes shortens it, and that's just something because of space constraints in the tool itself. But if you couldn't read the whole name, if you just hover your mouse over it like so, you'll be able to see the full name: OCFL, auto index, and cleanup. And this one, for example, says solution this, and then you can't read it. But if you hover your mouse over this, is solution design and process documentation part 1. All right. So the different colors here that you're seeing just basically indicates different types of epics And then, like I mentioned before, because of the grouping that you have horizontally, this is just categories of the work that you're doing. So everything that is underneath archiving, even though it might have a different color or a different name, relates to the archiving stream of work. So these are basically all different epics, so different chunks of work that we need to get done so that we can actually develop the archiving functionality in this product. Okay, so all of these epics that are here will allow me to actually get done the archiving functionality that I need to complete. Okay, now if I actually opened up any of these, for example, this one, only MVP for Research Office, let me just right click that and open that in a new tab. So we're opening up this epic here, only MVP for Research. And when I open it, you can see here all the user stories below it that are part of this epic, right? So as you know, Jira calls them issues, but this is just a system terminology, but there are actually user stories, okay? And if you hover your mouse over this, icon here, this green icon, you can see it's a story. This red one here is a bug. Okay, so it's a bug. So all of these different user stories are part of this only MVP for Research epic, right? As you can see here, that's why it's called here an epic. And archiving is the stream of work, which in Jira we refer to it as component. Okay, so you're seeing here the product roadmap for the whole year. So one of the reasons why product roadmaps are so important, so valuable, and so great for stakeholders is because at a glance, look at this, in a single page, in a single view, you can see everything that's going to get done throughout the year, what specifically is going to get done, when it's going to get completed, and how is the workload distributed across the different months of the year, and when things are going live as well. All right, so that's really cool. So you can see here, for example, if we went down here to the Discovery Portal Publishing, we have here two epics related to the Data Portal upgrade. Okay, you can see them down here. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so you can see it better. Now, in this example that you're seeing on screen, we're using the road mapping functionality by Easy Agile. So this is part of the Jira Marketplace, and I'm just gonna right click on that here, open link in new tab so you can see it. So Jira, Atlassian, the company that created Jira, they have a little marketplace, which basically allows you to add extra functionality and extra things into Jira. So to make it more powerful, more robust, right? So a little bit similar to what Salesforce does or many other platforms like or products such as Microsoft Teams, etc., which allow you to add extra functionality. So Jira does the same thing, right? So this company here, Easy Agile, has developed a few products to enhance that functionality. And that's what we're using here in case you're wondering what you're seeing. So this is one of those things that is not out of the box. So Jira does have a road mapping functionality out of the box, but we've actually enhanced it a little bit with this add-on that is by Easy Agile in the company and that we're working, and actually added that extra functionality to make Jira and the road mapping functionality of Jira a little bit more robust. Why? Because we wanted to see epics, markers, a couple of other things, okay? But again, Jira does have an out of the box default road mapping functionality, which you can use, which is very similar to this. Not exactly like this, but very similar to this, all right? Now, the markers here, these colors here that you're seeing vertically are the markers. If I click on this markers button, it's gonna show you here, and that basically allows you to see these markers, okay? And you can create epics here as well by using this button. Okay, I'm just gonna cancel that. Okay, but that's just to show you, like I said, an example of the product roadmap here in Jira. And the key thing for me that I want you to take away in this lesson and in this part of the course is that the product roadmap allows you to distribute and plan the work that you're gonna get done in the foreseeable future, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be 1 year. Like it could be 2. Some people do, roadmaps up to 5 years in advance, right? But in this particular scenario, we're looking at a 1 year view of this development and this build. And you can see how we distribute, and this is something that you would do as a team, of course. You wouldn't do this yourself. But generally, product managers own the product roadmap, and they're the ones that actually oversee how this is built and how this is constructed. But the team is part of it, and the whole team participates in how this is developed, how the workload is distributed, etc. Right? Because obviously, not a single person can make such an important decision without taking into account the input for everyone that is working on this. We need the input of everyone that is working on this. All right. So you can see here the first quarter and the work on the second quarter, etc. So as a team, we try to distribute how, when you're looking at how to distribute the work that you're going to be doing in your product roadmap, you got to think, of course, about your resources. So how many people you have working on this. You got to think about the workload, the complexity of the different things that you're doing, and then how much you can actually realistically get done, right? And then you start mapping it out, and you start putting the different work, spreading the different work across the different quarters and across the different months and across the different streams of works vertically as well, all right? So like we talked before, these big things and these colors here that you're seeing are epics. So big deliverables that you're seeing on screen are epics. And then inside each of those epics, like we saw before in this ONI MVP, there are a bunch of user stories that need to get done so you can actually take this one complete, okay? So once all of this gets done, we'll be able to actually mark this one, this big epic complete, meaning after I did all of this, automatically this gets done because all of this is actually like a child and this is like the parent, right? So the epic is like the bigger thing because it's so big you can't do it in a single sprint. And all the user stories that you're getting done through your sprints, once you complete these user stories that are part of this epic, well, then automatically the epic is then done. It's considered complete. All right. And as you can see here, we've gone through multiple sprints, and some of this work is still, it's still ongoing, right? Because there's still other user stories that still need to be completed. But over time, as you're completing the whole user stories, and you'll be completing the sprint, the epic as well. And then that way you can continue to move on to the next one. All right. But like I said, basically this is really good because it allows you to see when things are going live, when things are going to get completed. And obviously a product roadmap is not static. It's something also that moves according to the pace, the velocity of the team, right? So sometimes you might need to shift things around. And another thing that you would consider, of course, as you're building your product roadmaps are dependencies. So sometimes you would say, okay, I'm not going to start this solution design, for example, here until I've actually completed the ONI MVP for Research Office first, right? And that's why this is sitting afterwards and after you've actually have these epics, okay? So that's an example, all right? In the essential maintenance bit here at the bottom, you can see we have operating system patching, etc., every single quarter, because that's something that we're doing regularly, regardless of what's happening above. In this scenario, we still need to do the patching every quarter, and that's why it's looking like this. All right. Okay, guys, so this is basically what I wanted to show you in this example of product road mapping in Jira. And like I said, building this is very easy. You just create the epics, create the themes, and you can filter here if you need to filter just the musts, just the shoulds, the coulds. Here we're seeing everything right now because we haven't actually applied a filter. But this is really a good way of you developing, or it's a really good tool for you to develop a product roadmap in Jira. Like I said, which basically allows you to see what's going to be developed over time and when things are going to get completed. And you can continue to track progress, of course, by drawing your sprints using the marker functionality here. Okay. All right, guys. So that's what I wanted to show you on this lecture of the course. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.